Kona was born on the Enoch Cree lands of Treaty 6, which is colonially known as Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. They now resides on these unceded ancestral lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. Kona is a community organizer, facilitator, artist, and highly engaged citizen who spent 6 years at the previous incarnation of the BC Human Rights Commission, 15 years as a municipal cultural facilitator, and more than 30 years on personal passion projects at the intersections of orientation, identity, power, race, sex positivity, arts, and culture. Kona's latest community development initiative, Black Chat Vancouver, was co-founded in 2016 with her blood niece, Morgan, as a space of healing through connection for Black people. It currently offers 3 streams of programming themed as family-style in-home gatherings, community field trips, and broadcasting Blackness. Kona.
Oh my goodness. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Y'all look good at this early in the morning. Like this here morning, this very, very early morning, this here morning is, and while my body is in a state of disagreement with my choices, my brain, and more importantly, my soul, which exists here in Metro Vancouver, a region that boasts 2.5 million residents, and of which only 30,000 of them are people who look like me. Think about that number for a minute. Our province, according to the 2016 Stats of Canada, says that in British Columbia there are 46,000 Black people. That Crown Roast downtown holds 56,000 people. That means everybody in BC who is Black gets a seat in that place, and some of us can even put a purse on the seat beside us. We are 1%. And I could not be more thrilled, seriously, at the opportunity to be nourished by the presence and by the words of our guest, Sandy Hudson. Let me start by saying, Sandy is a fierce, effective, multi-talented grassroots organizer, a political strategist, and a communications powerhouse. This person is unapologetically committed to refreshingly honest public discourse, and she is a very compelling educator. So let's get into this. Let's back up some of those statements with some receipts, shall we? You see, Sandy is the founder of Black Lives Matter in Canada. And recently, she co-founded the Black Legal Action Center, which is a legal clinic providing direct services and test case litigation for Black communities in Ontario. It has the distinction of being the very first organization of its kind in Canada, and currently she serves as its vice chair. Look, you're gonna clap all through this because it doesn't stop there. She holds a Master's of Arts degree in Social Justice Education from the University of Toronto and is currently pursuing a degree in law at UCLA. And although this woman has a history of activity, this award-winning community organizer received the 2019, are you ready? Emerging Leader Award from the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education. Emerging. So let's take a little look back in time, shall we, about this emerging human being. In 2018, she received the Lincoln M. Alexander Award from Osgood Law at York University. Doesn't sound emerging to me. And in 2016, she was named one of Toronto Life's most influential people of Toronto. and one of Post City Magazine's most inspiring women. Somehow, Sandy continues to work with Black Lives Matter Vancouver and to co-host a Canadian political podcast called Sandy and Nora Talk Politics, and to leave a trail of victories behind her through the organizations that she works with. Her operating framework is one of possibility and hope. She holds the firm belief that we can achieve the solutions that we need to achieve. Lord, can I even speak this morning? And she holds the firm belief that we can achieve the solutions we need to the social problems facing our world today. I am deeply humbled and honored to introduce this incredible voice of Blackness in Canada. Come on up here, Sandy Hudson. Come up here. Get up here. You'll be fine.
Oh man, now I have to top that. I have to justify all of that. Auntie Kona, thank you so much. And before I start, I just want to acknowledge some people in the audience. BLM Vancouver is here. Can we get some acknowledgement for BLM Vancouver? And the folks from Ethos Lab as well. And I just want to say hello also to Uncle Patrick, who is an elder in the community who's been doing a lot of wonderful work for many, many years here in Vancouver, in addition to Auntie Kona. So thank you so much for having me. I want to acknowledge those people. So yes, here I am. I am in law school, the worst law student ever, because I'm here and I have a memo due on Sunday, but I have a few things to say. And I would be remiss if I was here and didn't mention first what's been happening at Wet'suwet'en. The agitation, the unprecedented agitation that's been happening across the country, this is really important stuff. And stuff that as people who are in the legal community, we should be both aware of, but also active in. Canada has a very long history of not following its own laws when it comes to engagement with Indigenous people. Canada has a very long history of not following its own laws when it comes to engagement with Black people. These are things that if we are going to be responsible members of a legal community, we have to translate for the general public. Because unfortunately, sometimes that message gets a little muddled. And I said that in the passive voice, but I should really be saying it in the active voice. Sometimes that message is intentionally muddled by people for whom it benefits, okay? And if we're going to be involved in social justice, we need to be translators. We need to be translators and deliverers of the message of what is truly happening. And so as people who have some sort of knowledge about, how the Constitution works or whatever, all the stuff that we learn in the place that I'm at right now, it's very important that we translate those things for people who maybe are hearing different messages, maybe don't understand why people are taking such urgent action. It is very important for us to take that responsibility seriously and to do what we can to get that message out. If we don't, these types of conflicts can result in death and indignities for Black and Indigenous people, and they have. There are all sorts of different strategies that people can take to affect change and to support communities that are going through these types of struggles. And I think that we have a responsibility to do that. I don't know why the Justin Trudeau and John Horgan want their legacies to be what this conflict will make it. I don't know why they've chosen that course of action, but I know what I want my legacy to be in terms of my engagement with this type of conflict, and I'm hoping that you folks think about that as well. As lawyers, as almost lawyers, as lawyers' friends, do lawyers have friends? That's like a serious question from someone who can no longer tell funny jokes anymore. Like, all my jokes are about torts, and I'm just like, what has happened to me? As people who are involved in social justice, people often go to law school thinking, we want to change the world, we want to have this impact on the world. And then you go to law school, and it seems as though they're really forcing you to think inside this really carefully constrained box. It's like, they want you to be creative, a really creative mind, but only within this box. And so people sometimes ask me, they're like, so you're like done with the activist life now? You've decided that there's like a better way to engage, to change, to make change? And I'm like, that's not really what's happening here. I had an interview the other day, because when you're in law school, you're always trying to get these internships for the summer. And I had an interview where the person who I was interviewing with takes a look at my resume and says, are you trying to work here to continue to do law reform work, to continue to change the world? Because I just want you to know that it can sometimes move slower in these spaces. And I was like, yeah, I know. I know exactly what that's like. And so no, that wouldn't have been my choice to do this for that. But it is to do this to understand that a little bit more. I think that when we are engaged in social change, we kind of need to be everywhere. It's really important to be tuned in and active in direct action, I think, on the streets. I think it's really important to be tuned in and active in education in our communities, speaking to as many people as we can about the issues that might be really difficult to understand if you're just living an average life, that we might need to distill down for a general population. I think it's really important to be involved politically and to have connections in maybe the more official houses of power. And it's really important to be connected legally and to have power legally with people who have the knowledge, the credential, and the ability to enter the spaces that as lawyers we, or almost we, will be able to do. Law won't save everything, but if we're all working together, using the strategy of law, using the strategy of the streets, using the strategy of teaching, using the strategy of government engagement, we can do some pretty powerful things. And that's kind of the work that I've always been doing, and I want to continue doing and encourage you folks to do as well. Some of the things that we've been able to change through our work in Black Lives Matter in Toronto has come about as a result of this type of strategy. So for example, I don't know if y'all know this, but there was like a lot of work around this thing called carding. I'm sure that news came out here, yeah. So carding being like the street checks that disproportionately police are stopping Black people on the streets, getting their information, putting their information into a database that then can come up later if you're like applying for jobs. And that has a significant impact on how people are able to live their lives and whether their lives get interrupted frequently, over and over. And so we had all sorts of different types of strategies to try to change this reality for our community. And so what that meant was that, yeah, we were writing policy briefs, doing a lot of research, engaged with our elders, going into classrooms, going into organizational spaces and doing education on it, meeting with judges, meeting with lawyers, and we were also sleeping outside of the Toronto Police Services building for 2 weeks. Because that last part, was the catalyst that allowed this change to happen where, they said they eliminated carding. It's not quite that, but it was a significant policy change that people had actually been working on for over 15, 20 years in Toronto. But the fact that we were able to kind of come together, agitate, and create a moment of that was a catalyst, that wouldn't have come together and changed everything without the underlying work that happened before and that was happening during the time that we were sleeping outside the police station in the cold when it was hailing in the most terrible weather ever. We would be outside, we'd have a day of programming, like we had a children's choir at one point where we were like teaching children's songs. And then at night, we would usually do some sort of press thing during the day as well. And then at night, we were meeting with a team of lawyers writing briefs to submit to both government and to different organizations that we wanted to sign on to the types of changes that we were asking for. And that sort of thing doesn't really get documented. It's not the sexy thing that comes out in the news, but that's what we were doing at like 1 in the morning. We're like getting our research together, working with the legal teams to try to get everything. It's a very sophisticated strategy. When you hear about it on the news, it looks like it's just, all these people are just out there on the streets, but it was such a sophisticated strategy. Change doesn't happen without it. And change doesn't happen without all of these people coming together to make that happen. We were also able to eliminate police, special resource officers, they're called police, that are in the Toronto District School Board. In schools. And so the way that program works is that they're only in the schools that have the highest population of black students. Like you could put it on a map. They're not in all schools. It's not a universal program, or they're not in any school anymore, but they weren't in all schools. It wasn't a universal program. And so we were able to eliminate that as well. And we were coming up with the strategy. We were like, okay, here's our 7-year plan of how we are going to do this. And we were actually able to do it in 3 years. Or I think 2 years. 2 years. And again, it was because of this really complex, sophisticated strategy where we were working with lawyers, we were working with journalists, we were working with teachers, we were working with kids also. That was really fun. We were working with kids, and we had allies who were on the Toronto Police Services Board and allies who were in Toronto City Council. All of this stuff coming together is how we're able to create change. And I know that sometimes we're not always going to be allied in all of those different spaces. Sometimes it's really difficult to work together. But it is essential that we find the moments where we can and that we do those things. And as people in the legal community, sometimes I think it can feel really hard or really risky, or it feels like something so uncomfortable. It's really what we're trained not to do. But I think what's really important is to always try to look for what's hidden in our lives, what's hidden, and bring it forward. I think that that's one of the things, if we commit to doing as people who engage with the law, we'll be able to really have a concrete effect on social change. And so if you are able to, get into maybe a little bit of an uncomfortable space and support organizations who are doing work on the ground, doing really risky work, or maybe it's just a donation. I support what Raji was saying earlier, get out your checkbooks, whatever. If that's all you can do, I support that. But there's a lot of power in this room. And I think that we can do a little bit more than that. And I think where we have those opportunities, we should be doing more than that. So look, we've started the Black Legal Action Center in Ontario, which is quite similar to the work that LEAF does. You know, we're doing test case litigation right now, also at the Supreme Court, trying to see if we can change the way that we do criminal law in this country, that we take race into account, because quite frankly, I hope I don't need to tell the room that a lot of the time, Indigenous folks and Black folks get a different experience when it comes to our engagement with the criminal justice system. And if we recognize that, well, then we gotta do something about it to make systemic change. And you know, if that seems obvious to you, and if you support that, please pay attention to that case as it's going on, and offer words of support to people who are going through that, who are challenging it. And when it comes up in the news, make sure that you're making it a popular idea, because I think that sometimes it seems strange to people who don't understand the ways that this really affects our lives and interrupts our lives. But we know this, you know, like we should know this. I hope everybody in the audience knows this, as people who are involved in the legal community or labor or friends of lawyers or whomever, people who would have me come speak. I hope we understand this. We need to make sure that other people understand it, so that we're not always just the only ones doing the work of trying to justify why it is that we're demanding the changes that we're demanding. And so that's a really important part of the strategy that we've taken to try to shift the way Canada engages with Black people. And LEAF has also taken a similar sort of strategy of being engaged in different ways and using the law as an important strategy, as a catalyst for change. And so I'm so honored to have been asked to be here to support that today. As a final thing, I just want to say, you know, before I leave today and go back to writing my memo, I really am the worst student, you guys. Like, first year law school feels like some sort of hazing. I don't know if that is, I don't know if that is the same everywhere, but I don't. Okay. I don't love it. My first, the first memo I had to write was, persuasive memo I had to write was supporting a police officer who had beaten an activist. And I was like, is this a joke? Is someone pranking me? I don't know. Anyway, you can ask me about that afterwards in the reception. But I do want to say that there are different types of advocates out there. And as lawyers, you know, we're taught to be a particular type of advocate, and we get a credential that legitimizes our particular brand of advocacy. But there are also other types of advocates that we need to support, assist, lend our credibility, credential, power to the type of advocacy that they're doing, and to join in. Because it doesn't have to be separate. And indeed, it shouldn't be separate if we're working towards some sort of systems change. It should be a holistic strategy. It's the only thing that works. It's the only thing that works. And I hope that you can all remember that when we leave today from this early morning breakfast, and continue to try to live our lives in the pursuit of justice, not just the way that the law teaches us that justice should be, but real justice for our communities, real social change, real liberation, real Black liberation, real decolonization. Oh, come on. If you can't clap for that, what are you doing here? Real decolonization. And an end to all the injustice that we see in our world. I hope, you know, maybe that's why a lot of us went to law school. Maybe not all, but most of us have, I don't know. Some of us. Maybe some of us just wanted to make some money. But I hope that there's some people out there for whom that was one of the priorities. And, maybe we sometimes wane and wax in our hopefulness for how we can change the world. But let me tell you something. When you believe that something is possible, you'll find yourself sleeping outside for 2 weeks, being like, what is happening? What is my life? What am I doing? And being inspired by all of the people around you who are coming together to join in on making that change. So I think that we have got to be inspired by the people around us, join in with the folks around us who are doing all of this work, and come up with this holistic strategy and just recognize that there's so many different ways to do advocacy. And let's do that and change the world. Thank you.
On behalf of West Coast Leaf, I want to thank you, Sandy, for waking and rousing us with your words and gracing us with the sense of hope, commitment, and inspiration that is going to take us forward in the work that we all do, and for encouraging us to lean into our discomfort to achieve social justice and to keep alive what's inside you that brought you to law school, that brought you into the work that you do, and that brought you here. Thank you so much for being part of today, and on behalf of all of us, it's been such a pleasure to hear from you.
Thank you so much for having me. And just one more thing that I forgot. So I'm going to be in a reception afterwards, and there are some books that I've brought with me through Massey Books that are on sale called Until We Are Free, which is a book where we had some folks from across Canada who are Black write about their experiences to kind of write Black Canada. And the proceeds from this book, which I keep forgetting to say wherever I go, but I haven't forgotten now, the proceeds from this book all go to supporting Black organizing in Canada. So it just goes straight back into the work. So, come see me. I'll be there at the reception. Thank you.